I'm Faye, and this is Conversations with Faye. Much more. Let's find out what's going on.
I'm going to put it on the updated.
Conversations with Faye, changing lives, one conversation at a time. Welcome, I'm Faye Waterman, and this is Conversations with Faye. And today, my guest is Dianna Jacobsen from Shine at Business. Dianna is going to be talking about real life on the farm or country life as it is. Dianna, welcome and thank you for your time.
Thanks, Faye. Thanks for the invitation.
Dianna, tell us a little bit about who you are and where you come from and what inspires you to do what you do, the amazing work that you actually do for them.
I grew up on a few thousand acres of farmland in southern New South Wales, so predominantly wheat and sheep and some cattle. I grew up seeing the challenges of farmers and people around us leaving the district at different times. Went to a school with about 20 odd kids, so when families left, it made a dent in the community. And as I got older, I realised that a lot of the time they hadn't wanted to leave. It was to do with finance or family. That broke my heart, and I really wanted to be able to make a difference. So I went into accounting when I finished school, because my limited understanding at that point was it was about money. We had droughts and we had, different things that would happen, and that made it more and more difficult physically and emotionally, and certainly financially for families. So I went into accounting, and then after a bit realised it's not just the numbers, it's the people. So I've added a lot of other qualifications and modalities and studies, not just in financial aspects and business, but a lot in mindset and personal development. The mindset behind keeping things okay. So the resilience, also the focus to keep going when things are tough. The empowerment behind that comes from understanding the numbers and understanding your strategy, and I really saw a lack of this. So over the years, I've developed my accounting practice to work in with a lot more holistic range than just the numbers on the page.
And might I add, it's not just accounting. It has a lot to do with mindset. It's resilience. There's all those things involved in it, but there's more than that. There's the support in the background, there's the asking for help, those sorts of things. Some people are too proud.
Certainly in the farming fraternity, more so with my parents' generation than mine, and certainly not so much with my kids' generation who are now young farmers themselves. But it was probably at their time a lack of any other services. You had the bank manager, you had the accountant, very occasionally you might use the solicitor, and that was it. So now we have a huge range of obviously stock agents and agronomists and people like that advise on the hands-on part, but we also have financial planners and insurance reps involved and lots of other people in the business team. But there's still a lack of support and education around specific business management for agribusiness. Whether that's younger people coming up through the ranks, whether it's older people coming in as a tree change, or in my experience, often with succession planning, they're only actually coming in their 50s and 60s, because until then, mum and dad have still run the farm business. So there's a lack of the fundamentals.
How do you bring the people together from the generations of a farm and get them to understand that all these working parts are an important part of what they do, and all they have to do is ask for help to find out something, which makes it easier for them. It takes a bit of the burden off what they're doing.
Absolutely, and we very much are a proactive partner with all the people we work with. We're a phone call away, and often we have people that we are phoning every day to make sure they're okay and not feeling isolated, and that it doesn't all get too hard. But in terms of those generations, Faye, we've got different perspectives from grandparents, parents and children, a lot more business management skills. A lot of that younger generation coming through have been off and done ag science or other business, other ag based qualifications at uni. They know their numbers, they know their returns on investments, they know their soils, they know their animal husbandry, which granted, my generation and my parents' generation certainly knew that, but they didn't have probably the degree of science behind it and the degree of business management in that. And that's becoming increasingly important with the commodity prices changing. We've got tariff issues, we've got interest rates, we've got seasonal problems, droughts, floods, fires, and things like that. So there's a lot of attention to detail needed in running any business, but certainly in agribusiness, because there are so many uncontrollable, so many variables. So that's where we really need that empowerment piece. Call it mindset, call it attitude, call it resilience, but it's really important that they've got that sense of information and education to make informed decisions that manage as many of the controllables and uncontrollables you mitigate as possible.
And you said something there which was attitude. And attitude is something that's really important for every one of us. And particularly when you're living on farms or in country areas, you have to have an understanding of all the issues that come, the floods, the fires, all those sorts of things. You have to have an understanding of how it works after these things happen and what you have to do and the cost that's involved in that. But attitude is a really important part of it to survive. Bring that resilience in, isn't it? And
it is,
that's
yes.
to do with mindset, and that's what you do too. And I always say when I mention you that you're not just an accountant, you are all these other things, because you've grown up in farming and you've experienced and seen so many things. And now you work with people all over the country to support them and build their succession plans and bring in their families who may have done that training and have a better understanding of, the science behind things, which is a really important thing these days. What drives you to continue to do it?
I think it's first and foremost the love of the land. That's my background. On my mum's side, my sons are actually 8th generation farmers in Australia. So clearly there's a lot of heart in that. And these are my people. This is what I've grown up with. These are the people that I've seen. We've experienced dreadful things, shooting sheep in droughts. We've experienced, suicides within the community. We've sorry,
She's making me cry.
It's we've seen the tough things, but it's these people that love what they do. They're passionate about their animals and their soils and their food production and the end consumer. In my personal opinion, I think the consumers don't have nearly enough understanding of their food provenance. There's very sincere, heartfelt work that goes into ensuring that there's the best care for the land, for the animals, for the product, for the consumer. For the standards that we have in Australia, they are among, if not the highest standard of food quality in the world. It's the recognition of that and trying to just get that information out to our end consumer. But the protection of our family farms, we see this getting eroded now by high costs, and we get corporates coming in and buying the land. There's not the involvement in the community, because you have a corporate buying up lots of little family farms because they haven't been able to afford to do the land transition. We specialise in helping with that, so that anyone that's a passionate up and coming next gen farmer or older people coming into the industry, we want to support them as much as possible. And there's so much information, ways that we can help them that they don't know about. My passion is working with anyone that we possibly can get that message to, whether it's speaking at field days or magazine or radio articles, whatever, but to give them the information and the education that they can then take to their advisors and say, how can we do this? If anyone ever wants to ring me and have a chat and get some information, I'm very willing to share. It's not about engaging me necessarily for the work, but really just to get the education out there so that we protect our families, we protect our up and coming farmers, we protect our farms, which often are 3rd, 4th, 5th generation farmland. You can just imagine the burden that's on people, not just to preserve their livelihood, but the ghosts of many generations before them that have toiled and laboured and
Slaved.
Yes, blood, sweat and tears. I saw what it was like for my dad while I was growing up, and the heavy physical work and his body now from that. And that was just how you did it. Obviously, there are advances, and that's fantastic for our generation and that to follow. But it becomes a huge emotional burden. And yes, as a fraternity, we as farmers are resilient. We know what the challenges are. We know the risks and so on when we go into it. We know the joys and the everyday pleasure of being out among your stock, out in your paddocks, working with your dog, whatever it might be. But it's very up and down. It's not a level playing field. So it's to bring as much support as possible to that business management side, so that wherever possible we can level out some of the highs and lows.
It's also really important to understand that when you're working on a farm, there is a certain amount of isolation because you're working 24/7. It's not a 9 to 5 job, it's a 24/7. You might get up at 4 a.m. in the morning and go and do what you need to do and come in and have breakfast and go back out and work for the day and then come back in. But you might have to go out in the middle of the night because something needs to be done. You know, that social isolation is bringing people in and asking, can you help me? Give me a hand, or what do I need to do so that they don't feel alone?
That's right. It's being part of that business team, but not we only call you when we need the tax done, or we only call the bank manager when we need something done. It's having someone that's kind of part of that team for just a chat. And when we see that people are not going so well, when drought is in full flare and so forth, that we can just make sure that we're keeping some texts or some phone calls or a bit of interaction or suggestions where there's some relief packages, for instance, especially after fires or during floods, where there's some grants or some fencing grants or something, just to do what we can. But the main thing is that people don't feel isolated, because when they're out by themselves working on their own and they're just in their head,
lots of
and
things
life's
can
tough,
happen.
that they go okay for a while, but at some point, everyone has a point where it all feels too hard. Just to help them feel not alone. And probably the biggest reward I see in my work, as I travel the country, I go out on farms with people all the time. I sit around their kitchen table, their sheds or their stockyards, and have a yarn. What do we need to do? Where are the hurdles at the moment? Is finishing a conversation and seeing the relief on their faces and just the more upright posture as they, we wrap up the chat, with their sense of, well, I don't know how to fix this, but she does. And I don't always, but I'll figure it out, or we'll bring in the people. But it's just that problem shared situation.
And what you said there, Dianna, was if you don't know how to do it, you'll bring in the people that can support them. A lot of the time when you're going generation from generation to generation, and particularly the older ones that haven't quite passed it down to their children yet, that don't understand that there is that support out there, and that isolation is, what the hell am I doing this for? And I'm going to say this, there's a lot of suicides on farms, isn't there, that we never hear about. What you do is prevent that.
We do in a lot of cases, and I don't normally say that, but since you've said it, because you've got to come to the conversation at their level. So whether they're 90, and I've got to say, a lot of farmers live and work well into their 90s because they are passionate about what they do. They have a purpose every day, and their methods will be different because of what they can physically manage. Their days might slow down, but they're passionate about what they do, and it's what keeps them going. And then you have a very different conversation with maybe the 30-year-old grandson and the 60-year-old parents in the middle, because everyone's got different priorities. Some are like wanting to ramp up, and the other ones are wanting to ramp down. So I act as intermediary a lot of the time, because there can be some friction there already in families, but certainly because their perspectives are very different. The other thing with farmers with that older generation, they won't let go of the reins, because that is their whole life's work, and we are never out to strip that from them. We're out to transition it gently and respectfully. But more so than that, that is absolutely their whole identity, whether they're 90 or 60 or 30 or 10. That's our identity. That's who we are. Particularly for men, women will have a yarn with their girlfriends, or they'll have some other interests. Men much more so, I'm Farmer Jones from here, and if I'm not that, what's my value? What's my purpose? So it's very important that we transition that gently. Most of the time they want to stay on farm. Sometimes they might want to move into their little local town, but it's to still maintain that respect for their part in the picture while gently easing into maybe newer, more digital systems or, different ways of doing things, but without them feeling alienated from the management.
Yeah, and I was having a conversation recently talking about the older generation moving off the farm into country town and fitting in because they know the people there and it's familiar, which is really important for them. So there's not that isolation. They can have a conversation with anyone. But also having that ability to be able to go back onto the farm and do some work so that they feel useful.
That's right. And this is what I see in the little towns near where I live and where I grew up. All of the other people that they mix with in town are generally also retired farmers. So they all have a lot in common to talk about, and that they're not that far, probably, less than an hour in most cases, and sometimes 10 minutes to go out to the farm, or for their sons or daughters or whoever to come and get them and take them out. They can just help for a few hours or help with the busy times of year and still be very involved and still have a purpose and a value. And particularly from the mentoring side, this isn't that the newer methods are better. I see this all the time where there's these wonderful new developments and I think, well, my grandfather did that. It's just that they've got some science behind them, which is no different to what they did with or without a science behind them. So sometimes that's a little bit skewed, I believe. When you come from an area where there are a lot of generational farmers, they recognise that seasons go in cycles and markets go in cycles. Like everything, they just work with the cycles, and they know there'll be some good ones, and they've got to put something aside, lots of hay in the shed and things like that for the times when there's the tough times. So the older ones can stay involved, but they're a wealth of knowledge, and that should not be diminished. It might not be done by newer systems, but they'll say, oh, this is just like the drought in 67 or the years in 43 or the something in whatever, and they understand how it works, what to expect, and maybe how to mitigate that. That not to ever diminish their part in the conversation, their place at the table.
Well, they've built that wealth of knowledge over many, many years, and it's very valuable. And I'm going to say they're the custodians of the land.
That's how they see it and feel it too.
They are the custodians who protect and nurture and work on the land to take it through the generations.
That's right. They understand the cycles. Their wisdom is not just their years of learning. It will be off the back of whether it's their father and grandfather or the elderly people around them that they've grown up with, which was certainly in my case, lots of just general conversations with people of my grandfather's era. Then they do recognise that they're only here for a part of that journey, and see that custodianship, that stewardship of the land and the care and the respect for the land, the vegetation, the animals, the soils and so forth.
And there's so much involved in all that. So you have those people who are experienced in those areas. If you want to learn about the soil or whatever it might be, and I can't remember the name of the name of the person that does that sort of stuff.
Agronomist.
An agronomist who comes in and looks at it and advises you and will support you through whatever needs to happen at that time.
That's great that we've got these advisors. It's great that we can Google anything. It's great that we've got the science and the technology and the new developments that are coming out all the time. We've got things around biodiversity, biosecurity and so on. But don't ever underestimate the wisdom of the old farmers just telling you, a season like this, here's what you should do. They won't pack it out with science, but generally they'll be on the money every time. Again, growing up with that, hearing the advice and the conversations with younger farmers today, and thinking back to what our family farm, the practices there with my dad and my grandfather and so on, they had that. They knew that. You can go right back to the natives of this land, and they knew how to care for the land, how there are seasons and cycles and what to do to address and mitigate each one. Great to have the science, but don't think that this current new generation
has it all.
Is the first ones, are the first ones to know how to do this stuff. They just might be putting a lot more technology behind it. but the generations before us knew how to care for their land and animals.
Yeah, let me say, as a person that doesn't never lived on a farm or anything like that, but I have a respect for the older generation who can say, okay, they're watching the weather, they know what's coming, so they prepare for whatever it is, and they move their cattle or they do this. If they've got crops in, they can't do a lot about that, but it's all about that preparation. And you look at the Indigenous people in generations back, they could read the weather. They knew a storm was coming. They knew this, they knew that. They could eat off the land, and they were all very healthy. The farmers have come from that and learnt and are passing that on to the next generation and the next generation.
My forebears, like I said, we're up to, I'm 7, my children are 8th generation farmers.
That's pretty amazing.
Not all on the same farm, but back through the years. The first of the forebears farmed with the natives. He actually was a pioneer that was given a grant of land in mid-west New South Wales, and their family pioneered that land with the Aboriginal people. They set up a station there, and that's become a big enterprise over the years. But so those generations learnt how to manage the land from the native. Every now and then we'll go through phases of embracing that knowledge and then sort of dismissing it because we know something better. And, it goes through flows. We're coming back to regenerative practices and sustainability practices, and we've got all these great labels. I look at them and go, well, that's exactly what we did. That's what my granddad did and we did and the older people around us. But they just didn't have those labels.
Yes. New names.
That's right. So it was still a lot of the same practices, but it's great that there is the awareness of that being taught.
That's a really important part of it. There's an awareness. People are becoming more aware of how important the sustainability of farms and the people that work hard on those farms. The support needs to be there. The understanding needs to be there. I don't know anything about farming, but I tell you what, I love the country. Could not live in the country, but I absolutely love coming and visiting beautiful land and looking at the nature and the birds singing and the cattle wandering the grounds, even the kangaroos that, eat all their food. But you know what? It is such a beautiful place to spend time. And when you spend it forever, doing it all the time.
So a couple of points on that. There is the sustainability and the feasibility are a delicate balance. You can be very sustainable, but that may not be viable. And what's happened with the generation sort of in the last 20 or 30 years probably has been, it's all about making profit. It's all about making money. We've got to pay for our headers and our machinery, and the price of land and the cost of inputs has really hiked up, particularly since COVID, when it was hard to get fertiliser and tractors and parts and so forth. Land prices have hiked up. The general return on investment and the operations haven't caught up with that, so it's quite challenging in that respect at the moment. Commodity prices, interest rates. We've got half of the country in drought and half in flood at the moment, generally speaking. But it has to be a mix always, and this is where Shine at Agribusiness comes in with that business management and that empowerment and the education part of, yes, we need to run sustainable practices. We're looking after everything. That won't change. But we also need to meet profitability and feasibility and viability and not sink the ship. This is where the degrees of science are really helpful, because it fine-tunes that old understanding, which was sort of a broad brush approach and not nearly as tight to the wire with money. So they're refining that, and new technologies and new developments, as well as understanding the business management practices so that they fit nicely. And that's an ever-changing landscape as well, so that you get a very customised, tailored plan. And then I do one-on-one work with people as well to make sure that what they've got is all about them and they're not drowning in irrelevant stuff. So it's about that the information is there for strategic planning, for succession planning, for just ongoing help along the way. That's what we specialise in. We're not here to take you away from your accountant or your banker or any of those people, but we're here to come in and work with you and your team. So that would be my core message, is the information that then empowers people. And I would say to the consumers who may have varying degrees of understanding or interaction with anyone on farms, please love the people that produce your food. Think about who you vote for, because our farming practice policies and anything to do with our trade and a lot of regulations are great and necessary, and some are very restrictive, prohibitive, and dare I say damaging. Think about what's going on. Look at things like National Farmers Federation, who are endeavouring to bring together all industry sectors within primary production and get cohesive messages for government on where change needs to happen and why and how, rather than those messages coming from people who might have just this much information or this much perception of something but not understand, and therefore the policies become very skewed to what really perhaps should be out there. Every time you buy food, send a blessing for the people that produced it. And some understanding for where that's come from.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Dianna. It's been a fabulous conversation, and we will be back because we've got more to chat about. I'm Faye, and this has been Conversations with Faye, and I'll be back next week with another conversation. It's bye from me for now. Thank you, Dianna.
Thank you.
Subscribe button on our YouTube channel, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Instagram. Changing lives, one conversation at a time.